Good morning this morning, and welcome to a Buckeye Fans on Edge possible flip of the number one recruit edition of the OHIO podcast. Do us a big favor, everybody, and smash that like button this morning. You can do three things for me that are absolutely free, cost you no money. Number one, hit that like button. Number two, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. If you are, thank you very much. And number three, make a comment down in the comment section of this video. If you do all three, pat yourself on the back and understand that I give you a big thank you very much this morning as we get our week started here in the great state of OHIO. Word coming out of the West Coast, several publications have reported, including Sports Illustrated, that Ohio State's number one recruit in the 2026 class committed a couple years ago in wide receiver Chris Henry Jr., who 2 years ago went out west to Mater Dei High School in California to finish out his high school career after playing his freshman and sophomore years here in the state of Ohio, is continuing to take visits, and he actually has several official visits scheduled here in his senior year. That's not to be surprised. We all knew that this was going to be a battle down to the very end for his services. Everybody knew when you're a number one recruit like that, you're gonna take phone calls. You're gonna continue to be courted. It's a rare thing that a kid of his caliber shuts down his recruitment when he makes that first commitment at a very young age, which Chris did at a very young age. Of course, Chris Henry Jr.'s father, Chris Henry, played for the Cincinnati Bengals, passed away tragically when Chris Henry was just a small kid, and his teammate, Chris Henry's teammate, Pac-Man Jones, took Chris Henry Jr. in, helped raise him. Of course, Pac-Man was a teammate of his father's in West Virginia, and so there was some relationship there. When Chris Henry Jr. decided that he was going to go out to California to finish off the last 2 years of his high school career, there was a little bit of some worry in Buckeye Nation that this thing was going to be a battle. This wasn't just going to be an Ohio kid who we were going to be able to snatch up, and he was going to be bleeding scarlet and gray, right? We knew when he moved to California that this thing was going to go down to the wire, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. I am not surprised, neither should you be, that Chris Henry Jr. is taking visits. Now, what is a little bit of a surprise is last week he took an impromptu, unscheduled visit to Eugene, Oregon. Now, why that is noteworthy and worthy enough to make a video about is because Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks have become Ryan Day's nemesis, number one rival on the recruiting front in the Big Ten. And this is something we predicted here on this channel. I told you all last year when Oregon joined the Big Ten that I foresaw Oregon and Ohio State, the Ducks and Bucks, aka the Nike Bowl as I call them, as Ohio State's new great rival, that you were going to see Ohio State and Oregon battle for the next decade for Big Ten prominence. And that's exactly what we've seen. Year one of them being in the Big Ten, Oregon wins game one. They win the Big Ten. Ohio State gets their revenge in the Rose Bowl. Ohio State wins the national championship. So you look at these two programs and you say, even though they're not scheduled on one another's schedule in the regular season in 2025, there's a very real possibility that they're going to see themselves again in a Big Ten tournament, a championship, or a Big Ten championship game, and or in the college football playoff. That's just how things are going to go for these two programs moving forward, because outside of Ohio State, I think the best roster in the Big Ten consistently because of their ability to recruit is the Oregon Ducks with under the leadership of Dan Lanning. So that wasn't a prophetic prediction on my part. That was just me reading the room, okay? But the fact that Eugene has come in to the state of Ohio, and I say Eugene, I mean Oregon, the Ducks, the fact that they've been able to come into the state of Ohio and grab a top recruit in 2025 and now turn around and really approach Ohio State's roster with the tampering that they've done for Carnell Tate and others, it should come to no surprise to Buckeye fans that when Chris Henry's dangled out in front of them out there on the West Coast, that Dan Lanning and Phil Knight and all that Nike money are going to take swings at someone as talented as Chris Henry Jr. When Oregon wants to be the Ohio State of the West, then you have to expect that they're going to step to you and they're going to take their swings at you. And that's exactly what Dan Lanning is doing here in the Oregon Ducks when it comes to Chris Henry. So Chris Henry Jr. decides he's going to take an impromptu unplanned visit to Eugene, Oregon. He gets there. Dan Lanning and company roll out the green carpet, if you will, for Chris Henry Jr. He's made to feel like he is the world's greatest recruit of all time. They're offering him things that, in all actuality, Ohio State's probably not offering him, and he's being courted. So here's what I mean by that. It is no secret in the recruiting world, everybody knows it, that Oregon is willing to go above and beyond just about anybody when it comes to NIL to win recruits. Now, this isn't exactly the approach that some of your top programs are taking, i.e., Ohio State. Do they offer NIL to recruits? Yes, absolutely. They're offering NIL, but they're not throwing the world at these recruits. And the reason being is because in their NIL budget, they have a large portion of that in retaining the roster that they currently have and paying guys from entering the portal and staying an extra year instead of going to the NFL draft, i.e., how Ohio State had the best roster in college football in 2024. They were able to keep guys like JT Tumulau, Jack Sawyer, Denzel Burke, etc. They were able to keep these guys from leaving early and going to the NFL draft, Emeka Egbuka for another one, and keeping them in house and coming back for their senior year by offering them some NIL. And so that has been kind of the approach that Ryan Day and Ohio State has taken is that the NIL is a three-tier approach. In that budget, they have some NIL for recruiting. They have quite a bit of NIL for player retention, and they have some NIL for the transfer portal. And so they've managed that NIL extremely well, and a lot of programs have taken that model or are looking at Ohio State's model and saying that's the approach that we also need to take. Now, what's a little bit different about Ohio State's approach and what you're seeing in Oregon is Oregon basically, Dan Lanning's been given a blank check to do whatever he wants from Phil Knight, essentially. Phil Knight is willing to open up the checking book, and when Dan Lanning comes to him and says, this player is being offered this amount from this school, and Phil Knight will say, well, we'll beat it. We'll beat it. He is desperate to win a national championship, which Oregon has never done. He wants to see that before he passes away. He's up there in years. I don't fault the man. Don't hate the player, hate the game, right? I don't fault Phil Knight for doing this, and I don't fault Dan Lanning for taking advantage of what is essentially a blank check given to him to build his program. It's also a reason why I think Dan Lanning decided he was going to stay in Eugene, Oregon, instead of going back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama to run the Crimson Tide program. I think he understands he's actually got a better opportunity to compete long term and in the short term in Eugene, Oregon than he does in Tuscaloosa, Alabama currently, as long as Phil Knight is there and is writing blank checks. So how does this relate to Chris Henry? Well, Chris Henry Jr. obviously as the number one wide receiver in the recruiting class, and according to ESPN, as of I think yesterday, the overall number one recruit in the class of 2026 overall. This is a young man who is going to garner a large sum of money in the NIL if he wanted to as a recruit. The question Chris Henry Jr. needs to ask himself is this: what means most to me? The short term big money that I could get from Oregon and possibly big money down the road as an NFL star, or the development I'm going to receive from Brian Hartline and Ohio State, some NIL, not as much, but the opportunity and possibility that development cashes me in long term when I go to the NFL and I make more money. That's the question he has to ask himself. And the fact that he spent time with Pac-Man Jones tells me that this young man is street smart when it comes to the business of the sport. Okay, so in fact, recently, I think it was last month, Pac-Man Jones was asked about what's going to happen with Chris Henry when it comes to this recruitment, and his quote was, quote unquote, "It's going to be interesting." So I don't know that anybody knows exactly what Chris Henry Jr. is going to do at the end of the day. I don't know that Chris Henry Jr. knows what he's going to do at the end of the day. He's going to take those visits. He's going to go to Ohio State on an official visit. He's going to go to Oregon on an official visit. He's going to go to a couple other schools on official visits. He's going to allow people to pay him, wine and dine him on these visits. And at the end of the day, he's going to sit back and he's going to let some schools negotiate. Ohio State's not going to want to play that game at the end of the day. They're not going to want to sit back there and get in a tick for tack with Phil Knight and the Ducks at Oregon. Oregon's going to win that battle over anybody. I'm here to tell you that right now. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to, do I want the big money in Oregon and stay out on the West Coast, or do I want to come back home to Ohio and get developed by Brian Hartline and a better coaching staff who's going to put me in place to become a first round draft pick at Ohio State? That's the question he's got to ask himself. That's at the end of the day what is going to be most important to him, is how he's going to make that decision. And so, as Ohio State fans, I'm going to tell you, a lot of people are saying, don't panic, don't worry. As long as Brian Hartline is recruiting him and is his main recruiter, we're going to get him. I'm here to tell you, it's not up to Brian Hartline on this one. Can Brian Hartline be influential? Absolutely. We've seen it with Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis. The list goes on and on and on and on. However, at the end of the day, this decision is Chris Henry Jr.'s decision. And even though he might be committed to Ohio State, which he did as a freshman in high school, at the end of the day, his true commitment is going to come right before he decides which college he's going to sign with and which NIL check he wants to cash. Today's verse of the day comes from Romans 8:31. If God be for us, who can be against us? I want you all to have a great week this week. Enjoy everything that God has in store for you this week. Let's tackle this week with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind, says Jim Harbaugh. Or as our boys say, you bring the juice and be gas station ready all week long, everybody. Have a great week. Remember, tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern, Chris has his call-in show here, 8 o'clock Eastern. Don't miss that. Thursday is my call-in show here again, 8 o'clock Eastern. And this Saturday evening, a very special 6th year anniversary live show this Saturday evening, 6 o'clock Eastern. You're not, or excuse me, 8 o'clock Eastern. You're not going to want to miss that. 8 o'clock. So 8 o'clock tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern Thursday, 8 o'clock Eastern on Saturday. You are not going to want to miss it. You're definitely going to want to be a part of our big party celebration this upcoming Saturday, guys. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day. Be kind to one another. I owe someone's OH. Sing Carmen, Ohio with all your heart. Till the next time, go Bucks.